This is Father Patrick Briscoe.
And this is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
Welcome to Godsplaining. If you like these episodes, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You can check out the link to our Patreon account on our website, godsplaining.org, or in the show notes. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Well, Father Bonaventure, here we are in another Advent season.
It is.
So we joined the order Math is Hard in 2010. So this would be our 12th Advent together.
Yeah.
Isn't that something, our 12th
nice.
season of expectation? Is there anything that's going to stand out a little bit differently for you this Advent?
Well, I'm assistant student master, so I'm living back on our third floor where we were as student brothers. So just like I suspect in Advent and holidays are more exciting if you're an elementary school teacher because you get to do, the coloring and stuff again, whereas in daily life they're okay. But I expect in the student brother kind of experience, there's a similar, there'll be more festivity or something. Certainly there'll be, we won't give away, St. Nicholas Day, I'm sure will be more exciting or something. So I'm sure there'll be little knickknacks and little experiences for Advent brothers and that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to that part. It just comes so quickly. It seems like this year has gone. This fall has been gorgeous here, but it seems like I can't believe it's, Thanksgiving is here and Advent is already upon us.
It moves quickly.
Yeah.
So Advent is not technically a penitential season,
That's true.
right? It's not designated as such in the Code of Canon Law. It's a season properly of expectation. Are the student brothers going to take on any Advent penances, though?
They do some little bit of discipline, you could say, not in the sense of the corporal discipline, but a little more silence.
Line them up in the hall.
Yeah, a little more silence, a little more prayer time, some attentiveness to screen time and this sort of thing. So just drawing back, trying to create a space to get ready for the Lord in that expectation sense. And as you say, Lent is more penitential. It seems like to me the Advent, as you're drawing back for the purpose of expectation, this sort of thing. So
I'm sure it's been mentioned before in the show, but we have that beautiful lectern, that beautiful pulpit, which is at the center of our chapel, which features the Blessed Mother, and she's actually depicted there pregnant.
yeah,
Which might surprise listeners who are familiar with the image. If you don't know the image, just Google Dominican House of Studies Chapel, and you'll see this brass lectern. It's a marvelous piece. But I think of her a very great deal during Advent. I think she's the most Advent image that we have in our chapel.
That's probably right.
So I notice her in a different way. I spent a lot of time meditating on her and on that particular image in Advent. So that's one thing I notice in my own prayer. Well, we do have a couple big announcements, which is pretty great. And so as we begin this episode, the first big announcement is that we are asking all of our listeners to consider donating to our retreat program. So listeners, if you're able to support Godsplaining in this way, please consider over the next 9 days making a donation to offset the increased costs of our retreats. So you're hearing a lot about inflation and unstable economy. Okay, so that affects ministries too. And our retreat program has been one of the more successful and enjoyable things I think we've managed to pull off in Godsplaining. So if you're able this Advent season, consider making a tithe, making a donation, making a gift to our retreat project to help offset the costs, the expenses that we carry for that retreat program in particular. So it's very dynamic, it's very apostolic. A lot of young people come from all over the country to these retreats, and that's a real gift to them, to young people who are searching, who are trying to live out their Catholic faith in a community. The second big announcement is that this year we're going to be at Seek in person. So the great organization, Fellowship of Catholic University Students, is hosting their annual gathering. Well, their big rally for students. Yeah, I know you got to figure out exactly how to describe Seek.
Yes.
I'm sort of sputtering. Anyway, the point is it's awesome, and we've been included in Seek in the last couple of years as one of the featured podcasts. But this year we'll be there in person, recording a live episode. So look for the show there. Look for the Friars of Godsplaining at Seek in St. Louis. We're really excited about it. It's going to be awesome. And last, our third big announcement is that you can follow along this Advent season with a daily reflection from yours truly, from me, Father Patrick Briscoe, by signing up at mydailyvisitor.com. This is a project in conjunction with our Sunday Visitor. mydailyvisitor.com will deliver a daily Advent reflection in your inbox. You can watch that quick video, reflect on the meditations that I propose, and pray along with that. So I'd recommend that program if you're thinking, okay, I want to do something this Advent, but I need something that's accessible, that's manageable, something that I can really achieve and accomplish some growth in my spiritual life. Check out mydailyvisitor.com. A lot of announcements at the top of this episode.
That's a time of season, that time of year, you know. A lot of things getting there, moving towards Christmas and otherwise. So there's lots of exciting things going on. And Advent and Lent are these two seasons where you get a little bit of push to spiritual things. You can remind yourself, oh, right. Usually this is where Lent, this is where the penance services are. If you're not a regular confessee, you might find penance services during Advent, and especially during Lent. So Advent and Lent are the kind of reminders to check in with the supernatural and the spiritual life, you could say. So I'm not surprised there's a little more announcements, but I'm excited about this daily visitor because you will pop up in people's mail. I mean, I get to see you every day, but not everyone gets the joys of seeing Father Patrick each day, giving a message of wisdom and
I'm better in a 3-minute email soundbite, I assure you. You can sort of turn it off.
No, worse, not better, just different.
Okay, well, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
But speaking of the spiritual life,
it's a good segue for this.
That's right. I want to get into the actual topic of today's episode, which is the Liturgy of the Hours. Mm-hmm. So one of the core and constitutive parts of our life as Dominican religious, which is a core and constitutive part of the life of every monk and nun and friar, is the prayer of the Liturgy of the Hours, the prayer of the church. So Father Bonaventure, if you were speaking to someone and they knew nothing about this prayer, they say, Liturgy of the Hours, and they hear words that they don't understand. What is the Liturgy of the Hours?
Yeah.
How do you explain it to them?
Well, sometimes the name of something actually doesn't help that much. But in this case, actually, I think it might, because liturgy, people think of as being like church-ish or praying together. Like praying together, I guess, is how liturgy is how people would think about it naturally. It doesn't mean that, but it's what it usually associates with getting together for liturgy, divine liturgy, what have you, a liturgy as sort of ceremony. And then the hours is the different hours. So the praying at specific hours. So actually the Liturgy of the Hours, the name, I think, unlike some names, indicates a good sense of what this thing is, which is to the time where religious or Christians or anyone who wants to pray along with the church at specific hours says specific prayers. And this is something we're used to praying along once a week on Sundays, at Mass, you could say. And then some people know about the Angelus tradition of praying at different times. So 6 a.m., noonday, there'd be a bell, and they say the Angelus, and maybe 6 p.m. at night or something. So those kind of things. But the Liturgy of the Hours are adding a few more hours. So at the mid-morning, midday, mid-afternoon, evening, and then night prayer. And then there's one that you could put early morning around there. So basically punctuating the day with particular prayers, which I'm sure we'll get into. So, but praying at specific hours so that your day is surrounded and is filled in with liturgical prayer.
Now, so for my job, right, I'm a writer. And what being a writer means is that there are times at the end of the writing where things are due. Mm-hmm. And we used to think about this in an online publication I was writing for, with a certain amount of flexibility. You know, if something was important, we could hold our email newsletter. But now I write for a print publication. Mm-hmm. And the deadline in the print publication is a little bit more serious. And by a little bit more serious, I mean, if we don't get it in on time, it doesn't happen. And so what a lot of writers experience, or any students who are trying to get assignments together at the end of the semester, or anyone that's wrapping up a year-end project at work, right? What we all experience in that moment is the kind of scramble to get something in, to win, to finish a task, to get it in on time. And when you accomplish that, there's a tremendous relief that comes. And so it might seem a little bit silly, but I think about the Liturgy of the Hours in the same sense. Because the Liturgy of the Hours, it's not tied as strict, it's not a strict deadline, but the times of the prayer do mark the day, and they're supposed to happen at specific intervals throughout the day. Yeah. And what the Liturgy of the Hours does is it wins back time for God. So it claims time, right, according to the cycle of our redemption. And I think of it something like accomplishing that project. Like, okay, this moment, when I pray the Liturgy of the Hours, I entered into this moment, and I've now stamped it with the cross. Okay, done. You know, and on to the next moment.
Sort of instead of a press release, it's sort of prayer release at different times. You've released the appropriate prayers
You were
at a
working on
particular
that.
time.
You were working on that from the beginning. When
Just
I
had
started.
it. Yeah,
Nice,
just got
very
it.
good.
Once you started the newspaper stuff. Yeah. I think of it as like slalom, doing slalom gates or something. So, you're going down.
Nice. That's way more dynamic.
And you can miss one of the, as you go, as you're skiing, if you're doing slalom gates or if you're watching someone, you can, there's certain points where you get closer and not sort of thing, but you can imagine if you're just playing around, if you go down, you can miss one or two and still feel like you actually slalomed. But if you miss a bunch of them in a row, then what were you really, are they really there at all? And I think that the Liturgy of the Hours is a reminder that like this life is a kind of slalom, making sure you're checking in with him throughout the day. And so they're at specific points that, again, as you say, takes back that day for God, because it just gets in dissipation. It can get away from us so easily. We just get busy with things. So there is this sense of, I know I'm writing as well, doing lots of things. And I know all of a sudden we're moving towards midday or moving towards 5:30 or moving towards 9 o'clock or whatever. I know I'm going to have to stop. Whatever important project I had is not going to be as important as going down and praying. That's what has to be, as you say, the kind of deadline moment. So it's good, and that's a great reminder of having these, not things that you choose, I've got to pray these and I'll fit them in, but rather you fitting into the schedule of the day from God. It just has an existential prioritization that is a good reminder to us who otherwise think that we get to pick out and choose how to do things.
Now, one of the things that I loved about discovering the Liturgy of the Hours, I was taught to pray it by my high school chaplain. So I've been praying the Liturgy of the Hours more or less consistently.
Yeah.
Now very consistently
Just
as a Dominican
gates,
religious.
A few gates here and there, but yeah.
But because I'm like concerned about my salvation and stuff.
Yeah, we promised.
But since I was a junior in high school, I've been praying this. And I found, why have I loved it so much throughout my life? Because I have found the Liturgy of the Hours gave me something to say in my prayer. And I never took to prayer that was oriented towards guided meditation, like the kind of Ignatian thing as I've experienced it. It just never really did anything for me. So finding that the church had words to say, an actual pattern and actual structure of prayer was, for me, totally liberating. Because the Liturgy of the Hours, as I've found it, is a kind of guide. And I think it's kind of a guide because of the power of the Psalms.
Yeah, I was going to say, but some people might say, well, what are these words here? And we could say, well, they're divine words. Some of us would even, if you believe
I think they're inspired.
If you believe the scriptures are inspired, dear listeners, then these are divine prayers, because the Liturgy of the Hours are largely made up with the Psalms, going through the Psalter. It used to be in 1 week you would get through the entire Psalter, 150 Psalms in 1 week. Now it's over 4 weeks. But the important part is that each one of these hours has more or less Psalms in it that you're praying. And then it has usually some what are called canticles, some New Testament songs, so Song of Mary or Song of Simeon, these things. But you could say the meat and potatoes of the meal that is any particular liturgy hours are the Psalms. And in that way, you are praying in the way that God told us how to pray. If you think of the Our Father as Jesus giving the very explicit, which we use at two of the important hours of the day, the very explicit way to pray, this is how you are to pray. In some ways, he could say, if someone said, that's great, but what do I do when I'm not praying the Our Father? You could imagine Jesus saying, well, that's what the Psalter is for. Because this was the Jewish, these are the Jewish-inspired prayers.
Right.
And they're absolutely gorgeous. And we don't get to see them in this way a lot, because for most of us, at least, we experience the Psalms as responsorial psalms smashed between two readings. And even
it's like
when
the musical interlude.
Even when you're paying attention to them, I find you're actually really trying to make sure if you remember the line you're supposed to do. So the cantor is actually singing most of the psalm, and the line, the responsorial, the part you're doing, sometimes that's from the psalm, sometimes it's not. But your main job is trying to remember what that thing was. So it's funny how the Psalms are the inspired prayers of the church, and yet you almost never actually pray them, even if you might be praying around them. And the Liturgy Hours picks that up.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So it can be very overwhelming though, because there are 150 of the Psalms, right? And despite them being, an incredible avenue for prayer, religious had to figure this out. So in the tradition of the church, only choir religious, monks and nuns would have been praying this prayer. And even if you were living in a monastic community, you wouldn't necessarily have been a choir religious, right? Like the vast majority of religious in the Middle Ages, for example, were still illiterate. The vast majority of people were. So they weren't joining in these sung prayers. They would join in with the spirit of prayer, however, with something like dun, da, 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 the Rosary, right? Which originally, before John Paul II added the Luminous Mysteries,
It's incredibly coincidental. It has 150 beads.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing.
So
Who would have thought?
There's a little connection here between the Rosary, which was called the lay Psalter,
Yes.
Or the Virgin Mary Psalter, with the idea being that this kind of repeated prayer, this opens up opportunities for meditation, for contemplation in a way that's accessible. So I think that the importance of seeing how the church responded to the way that the Liturgy of the Hours was once very inaccessible, with an adaptation like the Rosary is key, because sometimes lay people will have an experience of prayer. They'll come to our Dominican House of Studies, for example. We hear this often. It's very beautiful. I love when I hear it. People will be very moved by our prayer. They'll pray with us in our chapel. They'll join us for our chanted Liturgy of the Hours, or as we often call it, the Divine Office, which I like that name for it too. And then they'll go back home filled with enthusiasm, filled with the graces of that moment, and they'll say, "Okay, I'm going to pray this alone in my room," and then they become very dispirited when it doesn't work.
Yes.
So if a layperson were to pick this up, or to have an experience like that where they say, "Okay, I really love the Liturgy of the Hours." How do you walk them through this?
Well, I was thinking, analogy, I suppose, is I played tennis growing up, or I would be on a court sometimes and hit a ball over a net once in a while. It's probably better than playing tennis, but every summer U.S. Open would be on TV, and so that the U.S. Open play for a week or two, and then about, the next 3 weeks or something, it was hard to find court time. I would go and they'd always be busy. And thankfully, that would only last about 3 weeks, because people would have realized that the people on TV are professionals, that you don't just pick up a racket. And anyone's ever played tennis, it's a bit like golf. You have to practice a lot to be able to actually enjoy minimally the game, let alone do well in it. It's just not easy to do that. So luckily they would fall off. And I think it's similar with, if you come to Liturgy of the Hours of the House of Studies or in the monastic community, and you see this and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so easy. They're just singing back and forth and chanting, and it's beautiful, and the Psalms and the graces." And then you go home, and we're not professional prayers, but we're at least high amateurs. We don't get money for this per se. We take donations, but we do have we have practice. I mean, both Father Patrick and I we were novitiate obviously together.
Man.
And the thing you remember about novitiate is the choir practice all the time. And it's not just about how to sing. It's not just about being able to carry a pitch and know the tones, but also the rhythms of saying the psalms together. All these things that are just connatural now, you had to get used to, and you had to listen to someone else. You had to sit next to the other choir brothers and pay attention. So that's to say, the Liturgy of the Hours, just on its mechanics, is complicated. Let alone if you get yourself the breviary, the book itself, it is. I still get lost occasionally about whether on the midday of a memorial I'm supposed to take the reading from this. If I'm by myself, thankfully, if there's a few other people around, we're going to kind of sort it.
See, like looking over off the book of the guy next to you.
It's
like,
really,
what page are you on, Father?
Yeah. So it's really complicated. So a good thing is to, as well things, the zeal is good. The Liturgy of the Hours, playing the Psalms, absolutely beautiful. But finding, shall we say, an easy way in. So building your way up to something more significant, but being realistic about yourself, that there are lots of things between the Rosary, on the one hand, and the full Divine Office, Liturgy of the Hours, on the other hand. There's plenty of things, and it's not like you get to do either this or this, and there's nothing between that's valuable. And there's lots of resources out there for assisting you in praying something like the Liturgy of the Hours, or even joining in with just one or two of the hours.
I recently went on a Magnificat pilgrimage with my parents to one of my favorite places, Lourdes, and my favorite city, Paris. And the pilgrimage was fantastic because the frame of the pilgrimage was to enter into the Liturgy of the Hours through the version of the prayer that's offered by Magnificat.
Right.
So the Second Vatican Council, recognized this disparity. Okay, we've got lay people who want to pray, and they can now read
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Because it's 1960. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So how do we create a version of the Liturgy of the Hours that they can really incorporate in their lives? So the council said that this should be done. And I think the best version of it is Magnificat, which offers a kind of morning prayer, which has some of the anchors that we would recognize from morning prayers, the way that we pray it, but it's a little bit shorter, and it's so accessible. It's so navigable in the book. So I think some people think of Magnificat and they immediately think, well, oh, the mass readings, and I like looking at the mass readings and the other reflections of the book. Okay, well, it also has a version of the Liturgy of the Hours, which is so powerful.
I think people skip over this in the Magnificat. I mean, it's just that they think this is a mass booklet only, but actually it's much more than that. It really is a daily prayer booklet. And people treat it, of course, the Mass is you could say the main point. Just like for us, the conventional Mass, our daily Mass, is the source and summit of our life, right? But around that, supporting that, relating to that, are these Liturgy of the Hours. And with Magnificat, even though they're only like 2 or 3 pages, you could say the morning prayer and the evening prayer, which are the two most important of those prayers, the hinge prayers, you could say, of the Liturgy of the Hours, morning and evening prayer, with Mass somewhere between them or something. They're both in there. And so with the Magnificat, you have in that thing, which you probably have one to show or something, you have...
They're not paying us for this. So,
we know these people. Here. It's not exactly. But the Magnificat is a daily prayer thing. And I think people, again, think too lightly of the morning evening prayer. They think, oh, they're just there to fill, it's a page filler. No, it is this explicit how to lay people join in with the Psalms and the canticles. So the back of the Magnificat has the major canticles, the songs that you sit from the New Testament that are added to the Old Testament Psalms. So it really is a mini divine office in that thing. And it's very accessible. It's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But I think you're right to see it as this mini divine office, Christian prayer booklet. And if you just pray that through each of the day, you're joining in with, you're saying the same prayers that the monks are, but usually in a way that's a little more accessible to people. If you want to step up a bit, and you can add a few more psalms, like do the morning, evening prayer, something. But I think it's wise to start with something you can do, and then build from there. Otherwise, it's just like a New Year's resolution where if you start too high, you'll fail, and you'll be disappointed, and you'll have missed out on the absolute graces of praying the Psalms and praying along with the church. Because the important part is Liturgy of the Hours, praying at specific hours during the day that God dictates and kind of orders you to. You have an appointment with Him, not like you show up whenever. He's happy to talk to you whenever, but it's nice to make appointments with Him and keep them.
I was very surprised when Sister Gaudia Scass, our mutual friend, who's a sister of Our Lady of Mercy, I was very surprised when she explained to me that the devotion to the Hour of Mercy was not to say the chaplet at 3 p.m. I thought that's what it was, to say the chaplet that St. Faustina received. Okay, take that and pray the Divine Mercy chaplet at 3 p.m. every day. But it's not. It's actually to just pause at the 3 p.m. hour and enter into a moment of prayer, particularly of gratitude for God's mercy, because the 3 p.m. hour is the hour of the redemption. And I was really struck by that because here I was, I'd misunderstood the devotion, the whole time, what the sisters were fundamentally encouraging people to do, which is to preserve this moment, this hour. And I think that that's the key. It's not necessarily about what we do. I mean, it is for us because we have religious fasts, but it's not necessarily about what Catholics do. But it's that they are doing something to reclaim this time throughout the day. And as you're saying, morning and evening prayer, totally. The hinges of the day, really the fundamentals.
Yeah, another nice one is for us Dominicans especially. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably have some affection for Dominican things. The night prayer, Compline, you'll hear it sometimes called, but night prayer, the last prayer of the day is our best. If you've heard us, and you can probably, I'm sure you can find this online, but if you've been with us, join us. We do this on the retreats as well. In the retreats, people get a chance to enter into this a little bit with us. But night prayer is the prayer that's most fully developed for Dominicans. Our chants and our songs in there are the most elaborate because it was the only prayer time that you had to, everyone was going to be
at. The boys are all home, yeah.
Because back in the day, now it's quicker. We have cars, so we don't have to travel. We can be there for most of the offices. But back in the day, if you were out preaching during the day, wandering around, you had to go back to somewhere to sleep. And so when you went to the priories after the day of preaching or traveling from one prior to the other, you would always pray together the Compline. So that's our most developed prayer. And Magnificat even has little versions of this, particularly. But to pray at the end of the day, a psalm or particularly the Canticle of Simeon that we pray all the time, that's a nice way to stop. Some people do the general examen, of course, and we do a short little confession, which is important, thinking about the day and asking for forgiveness. But then a psalm and then the Canticle. It's just a great way to end the day, too. So for Dominican plug, obviously morning and evening prayer are really great and easier to do. Nighttime might not be as easy, but for a Dominican, Compline is the most important office for us in a sense. It's the one where we feel most at home, and there's something beautiful about it.
10 out of 10 agree. Any last thoughts on the Liturgy of the Hours as we wrap up here?
No, I think with all things, the important part is consistency. To know that it might be, to give it a try, ad experimentum, to say, oh, sure, I'll add this a little bit, especially during Advent again. It's a great time, because anyone can do anything for 40 days. It's like how you break a habit and how you pick up one. So you could say, this Advent, I'm just going to pray the morning prayer and evening prayer, or just morning prayer. Pick something and stick to it. Don't say I'm going to pray the whole office, but just start with something and enter into the Psalms and the prayer of the day, but in the sense that you're keeping an appointment with God, that your day is structured by Him, not He by you.
Fantastic. Well, just to repeat our announcements from the top of the episode, if you're able to donate to support our retreat program, we would really be grateful. So please consider making a donation to offset the costs of our retreat efforts. If you're going to be at Seek in St. Louis, look for us. Stop by, see the Friars. We love meeting our listeners. Otherwise, sign up for a fruitful Advent at mydailyvisitor.com, and you can listen to my little daily Advent reflections. Father Bonaventure, I think, it's going to be a quick disciple of this. Maybe we'll get all the student brothers to sign up for it. Probably not.
There you go.
But all that said, thanks to all who support the show. Please be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Consider giving us a review. We really appreciate the reviews. A 5-star review goes a long way to helping people discover the show and to finding out exactly what our content's like. So when you write a review, particularly, that really helps people. So if you say, I like this show, take a moment and give us a good written review. Otherwise, as we enter into this Advent season, know of our prayers for you, and we ask that you would pray for us. God bless.